Good evening. Tonight we'll explore the world's most fascinating lost cities. Settle in and let your mind journey with me through ancient streets and forgotten civilizations. Beneath the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean lies perhaps history's most enigmatic mystery, the legendary island of Atlantis. No other lost city has captured our collective imagination with such enduring power, inspiring countless expeditions, theories, and cultural references across millennia. Our tale begins with the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who first mentioned Atlantis in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias around 360 BCE. According to Plato, this magnificent island civilization existed 9,000 years before his time, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato claimed this account reached him through his grandfather Critias, who had heard it from the Athenian statesman Solon, who in turn learned it from Egyptian priests during his travels. The Atlantis that Plato describes was a paradise of extraordinary beauty and advancement. Imagine a series of concentric islands separated by rings of water, like a massive bullseye visible from the heavens. At its center stood a hill topped with a magnificent temple dedicated to Poseidon, god of the sea. The temple gleamed with silver walls, golden pinnacles, and a ceiling adorned with ivory. Inside towered a massive statue of Poseidon himself, driving six winged horses, so tall it nearly touched the temple's roof. Throughout the city, buildings constructed of red, white, and black stone created a striking visual harmony. Bridges connected the rings of land, while ships navigated a complex network of canals. Most remarkable was the mysterious metal orichalcum, described as more precious than all others save gold, which lined the walls of the citadel, giving off a fiery red gleam in the sunlight. The Atlanteans began as a virtuous people blessed with abundant natural resources. Their island produced metals of all kinds, exotic woods, and plentiful food. Their architects built magnificent palaces and harbors. Their engineers created sophisticated irrigation systems. Their society established laws promoting harmony and justice. For generations, we're told, they were guided by wisdom and moderation. According to Plato's account, the island was founded by Poseidon himself, who fell in love with a mortal woman named Clito. To protect her, the god encircled her dwelling on the central hill with rings of water and land. Their union produced 5 pairs of twin sons, with Atlas, the firstborn, becoming Atlantis's first king. From his name came both Atlantic Ocean and Atlantis. As generations passed, however, the divine nature of the Atlanteans became diluted. Ambition and greed gradually corrupted them. Their once perfect society began conquering neighboring lands, extending their empire across Africa and Europe. As Plato writes, when the divine portion began to fade away in them, and the human nature got the upper hand, they then, being unable to bear their fortune, behaved unseemly. Their moral decline provoked the gods' wrath. Zeus gathered the deities to determine how to punish these once great people. Then came the catastrophe. In a single day and night of terrible earthquakes and floods, Atlantis was swallowed by the sea and vanished. An entire civilization with all its achievements and knowledge, disappeared beneath the waves, leaving only rumors and legends. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Plato intended this story to be taken literally or as a moral allegory about the corruption of power. The remarkable detail he provides suggests historical inspiration, yet we know Plato often created elaborate philosophical myths. The story of Atlantis largely disappeared from ancient literature after Plato, with few other classical writers mentioning it. Interest in Atlantis surged during the Renaissance, when Plato's works were rediscovered. By the 19th century, the lost city had become a cultural phenomenon. Ignatius Donnelly's 1882 book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, proposed that Atlantis was the cradle of all human civilization. Helena Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, claimed Atlanteans possessed advanced technology and psychic abilities. These embellished versions, far beyond Plato's description, captivated the public imagination and continue to influence New Age beliefs today. Modern researchers have proposed numerous possible locations for Atlantis. Some suggest the Minoan civilization on Crete and Santorini, ancient Thera, inspired the legend. Around 1600 BCE, a massive volcanic eruption devastated Thera, potentially triggering tsunamis across the Mediterranean. The advanced Minoan culture, with its sophisticated art, multi-story buildings, and advanced plumbing, suffered severe decline afterward. Perhaps this catastrophe, passed down through generations and embellished with each telling, formed the basis of Plato's account. Other proposed locations include the islands of the Azores in the mid-Atlantic, marshlands in southern Spain's Doñana National Park, and even Antarctica. The Richat structure in Mauritania, a geological formation visible from space with concentric rings resembling Plato's description, has attracted recent attention. Each theory has passionate advocates, but insufficient evidence for scientific consensus. Contemporary geologists and archaeologists remain skeptical about a literal Atlantis. Continental shelves show no evidence of a sunken landmass in the Atlantic Ocean of sufficient size. The timeline Plato gives, 9,000 years before Solon, would place Atlantis in the Stone Age, millennia before the advanced metallurgy and architecture he describes emerged. Most mainstream scholars view Atlantis as a philosophical invention, though possibly inspired by real events like earthquakes, floods, or the fall of once great cities. Yet something about Atlantis continues to resonate with us. Perhaps it's our fascination with lost knowledge, our fear of catastrophic change, or recognition of how fragile even mighty civilizations can be. The idea that an advanced society could vanish overnight serves as both cautionary tale and enticing mystery. In our era of climate change and environmental concerns, a paradise lost to rising seas takes on renewed significance. Atlantis also appeals to our suspicion that ancient peoples possessed greater knowledge than we acknowledge. It suggests humanity might have achieved greatness before, only to fall and begin again, explaining curious similarities between distant cultures or the mysterious origins of certain technologies. Whether real or legendary, Atlantis has left an indelible mark on human imagination. It represents both our highest aspirations and deepest fears, a civilization that reached extraordinary heights only to vanish beneath the waves. As we gaze across the Atlantic's vast horizon, we can't help wondering what secrets might still lie beneath those endless blue waters, waiting for discovery. The waves continue their eternal rhythm over whatever may remain of this legendary realm as we prepare to journey onward to our next destination. Let your thoughts drift from the depths of the Atlantic to the lush jungles of South America, where another fabled city awaits, one whose golden gleam lured countless explorers to their doom. As we leave the depths of the Atlantic behind, our journey now takes us to the lush rainforests of South America, where one of history's most tantalizing legends was born, El Dorado, the city of gold. For centuries, this glittering myth drove conquistadors, adventurers, and dreamers deep into uncharted territories, often to their doom. Perhaps no other lost city has exacted such a terrible price in human lives and suffering, all in pursuit of gleaming treasures that forever remained just beyond reach. The legend of El Dorado, the Gilded One, or the Golden Man, began not with a city, but with a ceremony. Among the Muisca people of what is now Colombia, a remarkable ritual took place at Lake Guatavita, high in the Andes Mountains. When a new ruler was chosen, part of his initiation involved a sacred rite that would transform him into a living embodiment of solar deity. At dawn, the air would be stripped of his clothing and his body covered with sticky resin. Attendants would then blow fine gold dust over him until he gleamed from head to toe like a statue of pure gold. The golden ruler would then be placed on a raft laden with emeralds, gold figurines, and other precious offerings. 4 priests, also adorned with gold and feathers, would join him as the raft was pushed into the middle of the circular lake. At the center, while incense burned and music played from the shores, the gilded man would dive into the sacred waters, washing off his golden covering as an offering to the gods dwelling in the depths. Meanwhile, the assembled crowd would throw their own offerings of gold, emeralds, and precious items into the lake, creating a treasure trove at the bottom of the dark waters. Imagine this scene: a golden figure gleaming in the first rays of sunrise, standing on a raft adorned with jewels, surrounded by the reverent gazes of his people against the backdrop of mist-shrouded mountains. The spectacle would have been breathtaking, a perfect marriage of spiritual devotion and material splendor that embodied the Muisca people's values and beliefs. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they heard tales of this ceremony from native peoples. The Muisca civilization was already renowned for their extraordinary gold work. Their craftsmen created intricate figurines and ornaments, not primarily as displays of wealth, but as sacred objects with deep religious significance. Gold to the Muisca represented the energy of the sun itself, the life-giving force that sustained all existence. But as stories often do when passed between different cultures and languages, the tale transformed. Translation errors, cultural misunderstandings, and the Spanish obsession with gold combined to warp the narrative. What began as an account of a gilded man evolved into rumors of an entire city made of gold, The conquistadors, driven by insatiable greed and the promise of unimaginable wealth, launched expedition after expedition into the unforgiving jungles and mountains. The earliest search for El Dorado was conducted in the 1530s by German conquistadors under contract to the Spanish crown. Ambrosius Ahinger led several brutal expeditions through present day Colombia and Venezuela, torturing and killing indigenous peoples for information about the Golden City. Although he found some gold ornaments, the magnificent city he sought remained elusive. Ahinger never returned from his final expedition, killed by a poisoned arrow. Francisco Pizarro, the conqueror of the Inca Empire, and his brother Gonzalo were among those saddened by these golden dreams. In 1540, having already witnessed the incredible wealth of the Incas, Gonzalo Pizarro led an expedition of 200 Spaniards and 4,000 native porters eastward from Quito, Ecuador. They were searching for the country of La Canela, the land of cinnamon, and rumors of a nearby golden city. The journey was brutal. Men died of hunger, disease, and attacks from indigenous tribes. The expedition became a nightmare of suffering. When food ran scarce, they ate their horses, then their dogs, then resorted to boiling leather from their saddles to survive. Desperate and near starvation, Pizarro sent his lieutenant, Francisco de Orellana, ahead with a small group to find food. Orellana's party reached the Amazon River and, unable to return against its powerful current, continued downriver in a remarkable journey that became the first European navigation of the Amazon all the way to the Atlantic. Orellana reported hearing tales from river tribes of wealthy civilizations further inland, stories that only fueled the El Dorado obsession. Meanwhile, Pizarro and his remaining men, after months of futile searching, were forced to turn back, returning to Quito with less than half their original party. Many who survived were permanently broken in health and spirit. Yet even this disastrous outcome did nothing to discourage others from attempting the same journey. Another infamous expedition was led by Lope de Aguirre, whose descent into madness during his search for El Dorado in 1560 was so disturbing it has been dramatized in films and books. Starting with 400 men, Aguirre led a failed expedition down the Amazon during which he staged a bloody mutiny, declared himself the wrath of God, executed dozens of his own men, including women and children who had accompanied the expedition, and eventually declared himself at war with the King of Spain. His reign of terror ended only when he was captured and executed, his body cut into pieces and scattered across different South American colonies as a warning. Another famous seeker was Sir Walter Raleigh, the English explorer and favorite of Queen Elizabeth I. In 1595, Raleigh ventured to South America in search of El Dorado, which he believed lay beside a great lake called Parima in what is now Guyana. His expedition traveled up the Orinoco River, battling harsh conditions and hostile terrain. Though he found no city of gold, Raleigh was so convinced of its existence that in his published account, The Discovery of the Large, Rich, and Beautiful Empire of Guyana, he claimed to have come within a short distance of Manoa, the Golden City, held back only by flooding. Raleigh's reputation at court depended on finding El Dorado, and in 1617 he returned for another attempt, despite being elderly and in poor health. This second journey ended in tragedy when his son Wat was killed in a skirmish with Spaniards near San Tome. Raleigh, devastated by his son's death and the failure to find El Dorado, returned to England only to face execution for disobeying orders to avoid conflict with Spanish settlements. Throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, countless expeditions searched for El Dorado across Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, and the Guyanas. The toll in human lives was staggering. Entire parties vanished into the wilderness, never to return. Those who did survive often came back broken in body and mind, their dreams of wealth shattered by the harsh realities of the jungle. Indigenous populations suffered even more severely, subjected to torture, enslavement, and mass killings by gold crazed Europeans desperate for information about the ever elusive city. But what truth lay behind the legend? We now know that the Muisca civilization did indeed practice gold rituals at Lake Guatavita. Archaeological finds confirm their sophisticated gold working skills. Hundreds of exquisite gold objects have been recovered from the lake and surrounding areas, validating at least part of the native accounts. The Muisca did create the intricate gold tunjos, votive figurines, described in early reports, and gold did play a central role in their religious ceremonies. When conquistadors arrived, they found beautiful gold artifacts that seemed to confirm the rumors of vast wealth. The Spanish captured the last Muisca ruler, Sajipa, in 1537 and tortured him to reveal the location of supposed gold hoards. After extracting a ransom, they killed him anyway, but never found the quantity of gold they believed existed. The Muisca valued gold not for its economic worth, but for its spiritual significance. It represented the energy of the sun, a sacred power rather than a form of currency. The Spanish, unable to understand this different value system, could only interpret the Muisca's reverence for gold through the lens of their own material desires. In the 18th century, Lake Guatavita became the focus of recovery efforts. The most ambitious attempt came in 1700 when merchants drained much of the lake by cutting a notch in its rim. As the water level fell, they recovered some gold items from the exposed mud, but far less than the legendary treasures they had hoped for. The lake bed proved treacherously soft, swallowing several treasure hunters before the rains came and refilled the basin. Later attempts to drain the lake were similarly disappointing, though they did yield enough artifacts to confirm the basic elements of the El Dorado ceremony. The real El Dorado may never have been a city at all, but rather the gold-rich territories of the Muisca Confederation, centered around what is now Bogota, Colombia. The Muisca were indeed wealthy in gold, which they traded with neighboring peoples. Their sophisticated metalwork shows extraordinary craftsmanship, creating objects of both practical and ceremonial use. The Spanish were not entirely wrong about the region's gold. Colombia has indeed proven to be one of South America's richest sources of the precious metal. Another theory suggests that rumors of El Dorado may have been deliberately spread by indigenous peoples as a strategy to send the destructive conquistadors away from their actual settlements and deeper into hostile territories. If so, it was remarkably effective, luring wave after wave of Europeans to their deaths in the unforgiving Amazon basin. The mythical city on Lake Parima appeared on European maps well into the 18th century before finally being recognized as fictional. Yet the legend persists, shifting form throughout the centuries. El Dorado became a metaphor for an unattainable prize, a dream that drives men to great achievements and terrible follies. It has inspired novels, poems, films, and even animated features. The name itself has become shorthand for any place where quick fortunes might be made, from gold rush towns to casino cities. What is most fascinating about El Dorado is how it reveals the collision of two worldviews. To the indigenous peoples of South America, gold was sacred, a metal with spiritual properties, valuable for its beauty and its connection to divine powers. To European conquistadors, it was wealth, power, and status in material form. This fundamental misunderstanding fueled centuries of quests and shaped the destiny of an entire continent. The tragedy of El Dorado lies not just in the lives lost pursuing it, but in how its legend contributed to the destruction of the very cultures that gave birth to it. The Muisca civilization was systematically dismantled by conquistadors, its people enslaved or killed, its religious practices banned, and its artistic traditions suppressed. The gold objects that survived were melted down into ingots, their cultural and religious significance erased as they were transformed into European currency. Modern archaeological projects in Colombia continue to uncover evidence of the sophisticated pre Columbian cultures that inspired the El Dorado legend. The Gold Museum in Bogota houses over 30,000 gold artifacts, including spectacular pieces from the Muisca and other indigenous cultures. These treasures, the few that escaped the Spanish melting pots, offer a glimpse of the artistry and spiritual worldview that spawned one of history's most enduring legends. In recent decades, new discoveries have reignited interest in the historical basis for El Dorado. In the 1990s, archaeologists working in the Ecuadorian Amazon discovered evidence of large settlements linked by road networks, complex societies in areas long thought to have been pristine wilderness. These findings suggest that early European reports of wealthy civilizations in the Amazon basin, dismissed for centuries as fantasy, may have contained more truth than previously believed. As we drift away from the golden shores of this mythical city, consider how dreams of untold riches continue to drive human exploration even today. While modern adventurers might seek different treasures, knowledge, fame, scientific discovery, the promise of something extraordinary waiting just beyond the horizon remains as compelling as ever. The story of El Dorado reminds us of both the inspiring power of human dreams and the terrible cost when those dreams become all consuming obsessions. The jungle canopy closes over El Dorado once more, hiding its golden secrets. We now turn our gaze eastward toward the towering peaks of the Himalayas, where another legendary paradise awaits in our next chapter, a place not of gold and greed, but of wisdom, peace, and the promise of eternal youth. Our journey now leads us to the towering peaks and hidden valleys of the Himalayas, where snow capped mountains rise like sentinels guarding ancient secrets. Here, nestled among the highest places on earth, lies the legend of Shangri-La, a paradise on earth, a place of eternal youth and wisdom, hidden from the chaos and destruction of the outside world. Unlike the gold obsessed visions of El Dorado that drove men to ruin through greed, Shangri La represents humanity's dream of finding perfect peace and harmony, a utopia where the best aspects of civilization are preserved and where time itself bends to allow extraordinary longevity. Unlike Atlantis and El Dorado, whose legends stretch back to antiquity, the legend of Shangri La is relatively recent in origin. The name first appeared in James Hilton's 1933 novel, Lost Horizon, which became an instant bestseller and later a classic film directed by Frank Capra. In this tale, a plane carrying four Westerners crashes in the Himalayas. The survivors are led by mysterious guides through treacherous mountain passes to a hidden valley called Shangri-La, where they discover a monastery called Karakal, whose inhabitants enjoy extraordinarily long lives in a land of peace and harmony. The valley is described as a place of moderate climate, despite the surrounding snowy peaks, with fertile lands where fruit grows in abundance. The monastery itself contains treasures of human creation from across cultures, books, art, and music preserved for future generations. The inhabitants practice a philosophy that combines elements of Buddhism and Christianity, focused on moderation in all things. Most remarkably, time moves differently in Shangri La. Aging slows dramatically, allowing people to live for centuries while maintaining their youth and vitality. Hilton's fictional creation captured the imagination of millions and quickly entered our cultural lexicon. The term Shangri-La became shorthand for any earthly paradise, a place of exceptional beauty and peace remote from the troubles of modern life. Hotel chains, luxury resorts, and retirement communities adopted the name to evoke images of perfect tranquility and harmony. Yet the author didn't create the concept from nothing. Shangri-La draws heavily from the ancient Tibetan legend of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom where enlightened beings preserve sacred knowledge for a time when the world will need it most. According to Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Shambhala is both a physical place and a spiritual state, a pure land concealed among the mountains, accessible only to those who are spiritually prepared to find it. The concept of Shambhala dates back to ancient Sanskrit texts from India, particularly the Kalachakra Tantra, which was introduced to Tibet in the 11th century. These texts describe Shambhala as a kingdom ruled by enlightened kings who preserve the most sacred Buddhist teachings. The kingdom is said to be shaped like an eight-petaled lotus flower, surrounded by rings of snow mountains that protect it from discovery. At its center stands a magnificent palace made of gold, crystal, coral, and gems, where the Wisdom King resides. According to tradition, as the outside world descends further into materialism, warfare, and spiritual corruption, Shambhala becomes increasingly difficult to find. Yet, in the darkest hour, when the world is dominated by destructive forces, the warriors of Shambhala will emerge to defeat evil and usher in a golden age of peace and spiritual awakening. Until that time, only those of exceptional spiritual development can find the path to this hidden realm. The belief in hidden paradises has deep roots in many cultures across Asia and beyond. Persian myths tell of a garden called Eridu, a place of perfect harmony where immortality was possible. Chinese folklore speaks of the Kunlun Mountains as the home of immortals living in a perfect society. Buddhist texts from Tibet speak of hidden valleys called Bayuls, sanctuaries established by the 8th century guru Padmasambhava, the founder of Tibetan Buddhism. These sacred places were said to remain sealed until times of strife, when they would open to provide refuge for the righteous. Many such bayouls have been identified throughout the Himalayan region in Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, and Tibet. These are typically remote valleys surrounded by mountains, often with mild microclimates that contrast with the harsh surroundings. Some of these places, like the Kingdom of Mustang in Nepal or certain valleys in Bhutan, remained closed to outsiders until very recently, preserving unique cultural traditions and religious practices for centuries. What makes Shangri-La particularly fascinating is how it merges Eastern and Western conceptions of paradise. It combines the Tibetan spiritual ideal of a pure land with Western desires for longevity, the preservation of culture, and escape from the modern world's troubles. In Hilton's novel, Shangri-La is created by a Catholic missionary who becomes the High Lama, living for hundreds of years while gathering the wisdom and beauty of human civilization, preserving it from the wars and destruction that plague the outside world. The character of the High Lama in the novel explains the purpose of Shangri-La: to collect and protect the best of human culture during a coming dark age of war and destruction. There will be such a cataclysm as the world has not seen before, he warns, prophesying a future of global warfare using terrible weapons. The monastery's inhabitants, with their extended lifespans, would preserve humanity's greatest achievements until the storm passed, after which they would emerge to rebuild civilization. Hilton wrote the novel as the shadows of totalitarianism were spreading across Europe, and his vision of a sanctuary preserving civilization's treasures from barbarity resonated powerfully with readers fearful of the coming storm. The myth of Shangri-La gained additional power during World War II when it became a symbol of hope and peace in a time of global conflict. In 1942, after the famous Doolittle raid on Tokyo, President Franklin Roosevelt told reporters that the American planes had flown from Shangri-La when asked about their base. This was a deliberate use of the mythical name to keep the actual location, the USS Hornet aircraft carrier, secret. Later, a U.S. aircraft carrier was indeed named USS Shangri-La in commemoration of this moment, cementing the link between the mythical paradise and American military imagination. During the Cold War, the idea of Shangri-La as a refuge from nuclear apocalypse took on new meaning. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists created the Doomsday Clock to represent how close humanity was to self destruction, and the idea of hidden valleys protected from radiation and warfare seemed increasingly appealing. Government continuity of operations bunkers, designed to preserve leadership during nuclear war, represented a grim, militarized version of Hilton's monastery, preserving civilization's best aspects. But is there any truth behind the legend? Some believe that Hilton based his paradise on the real valley of Hunza in what is now northern Pakistan. The Hunza Valley is indeed strikingly beautiful, surrounded by snow capped peaks, with a population known for their longevity and health. British colonial officials who visited the region in the early 20th century reported that the inhabitants commonly lived to great ages, a claim that has since been both supported and disputed by researchers studying centenarians. The valley's relative isolation, combined with a diet rich in fresh fruits and vegetables, pure glacial water, and regular physical activity, does promote good health, even if not the near immortality described in the novel. Others point to the kingdom of Bhutan, sometimes called the last Shangri-La, a Buddhist nation nestled in the Himalayas that measures progress in terms of gross national happiness rather than economic output. Bhutan's commitment to preserving its traditions, environment, and spiritual heritage while carefully managing outside influences does echo some of the values associated with the fictional Shangri-La. Until recently, the country strictly limited tourism and foreign influences, creating a place that seems suspended in time compared to its rapidly modernizing neighbors. In Tibet itself, some identify the Kunlun Mountains as a possible location of the mythical Shambhala. The remote Zhongdian County in China's Yunnan province was officially renamed Shangri-La County in 2001, claiming to be the inspiration for Hilton's paradise. This was as much a tourism marketing strategy as a historical claim, but the area does feature stunning mountain landscapes and Tibetan Buddhist culture that evoke aspects of the fictional valley. The Yarlung Tsangpo Grand Canyon in Tibet, one of the deepest canyons in the world, contains isolated subtropical ecosystems surrounded by high mountains, a geographic reality that parallels the warm, fertile valley amid snowy peaks described in the novel. Expeditions in the 1990s discovered a waterfall called Hidden Falls in this region that had previously only been rumored to exist, demonstrating that even in the modern era, the Himalayas can still conceal geographical secrets. Whether any of these places truly inspired the novel remains uncertain, but they capture something of the myth's essence: isolated beauty, preserved traditions, and a sense of otherworldly peace. Perhaps the most plausible theory is that Hilton, who never visited the Himalayas himself, drew on travelers' accounts from various regions to create a composite fictional landscape that embodied his utopian ideals. What's most remarkable about Shangri-La is how it represents our collective yearning for a better world. In times of war, environmental destruction, and social upheaval, the idea of a hidden paradise becomes particularly powerful. It whispers to us of the possibility that somewhere, somehow, a better way of life has been preserved, one in harmony with nature, where wisdom takes precedence over material gain, and where the best aspects of human civilization are honored and maintained. The longevity associated with Shangri-La also speaks to a universal human desire to transcend our limited lifespans. The idea that we might live long enough to gain true wisdom, to see the long arc of history, and to perfect ourselves through accumulated experience has tremendous appeal. While modern science seeks to extend human lifespan through medicine and technology, the legend of Shangri-La suggests a more holistic approach, that longevity comes from living in harmony with nature and practicing moderation in all things. Unlike the treasure hunting expeditions that sought El Dorado or Atlantis, searching for Shangri La has always been more of a spiritual than a material quest. Those who seek this hidden paradise are looking not for gold or power, but for enlightenment, peace, and a more meaningful existence. There is something poignant about this search, the recognition that our modern world, for all its technological marvels and material comforts, often leaves us spiritually hungry and disconnected from deeper values. Modern seekers continue to travel through the Himalayas, searching for their own version of Shangri-La. Some find it in remote monasteries, where ancient spiritual traditions continue unbroken despite the turbulent history of the region. Others discover it in pristine valleys, untouched by industrialization, where people live simply but contentedly in close connection with the natural world. Adventure tourists trek to increasingly remote areas, hoping to glimpse a way of life that seems to have vanished elsewhere. What they're really seeking may be less a physical place than a state of mind, a moment of perfect balance and harmony when the stresses of modern life fall away and we reconnect with something deeper and more meaningful. Perhaps this is why the legend endures, even as satellite mapping and global tourism have left fewer and fewer blank spaces on our maps. Shangri-La represents not just a hidden valley, but a hidden potential within human society and within ourselves, the possibility of creating a life of meaning, beauty, and harmony even in a troubled world. The story of Shangri-La reminds us that paradise is not necessarily something we find, but something we create through our values and choices. While we may never discover a valley where people live for centuries in perfect peace, we can strive to build communities that preserve the best of human culture, live in harmony with nature, and value wisdom over material accumulation. In this sense, the true legacy of Shangri-La may be its power to inspire us toward a better way of living. As we leave the misty valleys and soaring peaks of the Himalayas, perhaps the true gift of Shangri-La is not the promise of eternal life or hidden knowledge, but the reminder that paradise might be closer than we think, if only we have eyes to see it and the wisdom to preserve what truly matters. Our journey continues, taking us now from the realm of literary legend to archaeological reality, as we explore a city that may have been the real world inspiration for the most famous lost city of all time, a place where history and myth converge in the depths of the ancient Mediterranean. From the mythical paradise of Shangri-La, our journey now takes us to more solid ground, to ancient Greece, where one winter night in 373 BCE, a thriving city vanished beneath the waves. This is the story of Helike, a prosperous Greek city that some scholars believe may have been the real-world inspiration for Plato's Atlantis. Unlike the purely legendary cities we've explored so far, Helike was unquestionably real, its existence documented by numerous ancient writers, its destruction witnessed and recorded by contemporaries, and its remains finally discovered by modern archaeologists after centuries of searching. Helike was the principal city of Achaia, located in the northern Peloponnese on the shores of the Gulf of Corinth. Founded in the Bronze Age, it had grown by the classical period into a significant cultural, religious, and political center. The city stood as the capital of the 12-city Achaean League, a confederation that would later play an important role in Greek politics. As a coastal settlement with a natural harbor, Helike prospered through maritime trade, becoming wealthy and influential throughout the region. The city was particularly famed for its temple to Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes, which stood as the central place of worship for the entire Achaean League. This magnificent temple attracted pilgrims from across the Greek world who came to pay homage to the powerful deity. Bronze coins minted in Helicus bore the image of Poseidon, testament to the god's importance to the city's identity and prosperity. The irony that a city devoted to the earthquake god would eventually be destroyed by that very force was not lost on ancient commentators who saw divine retribution in Helike's fate. On a winter night in 373 BCE, disaster struck with little warning. Ancient accounts tell us that strange phenomena preceded the catastrophe. Swarms of small animals, including rats, snakes, and weasels, suddenly fled the city, heading toward higher ground in the mountains. This unusual animal behavior, recognized today as a possible precursor to seismic events, went unheeded by the human inhabitants. Then, in the darkness of night, came a massive earthquake. The ground heaved and buckled, buildings collapsed, and the coastline itself appeared to drop. Following the earthquake, a massive tsunami swept inland, engulfing the already damaged city. By morning light, Helike was gone, submerged beneath the waters of the Gulf of Corinth. The catastrophe was so complete and so sudden that few, if any, of its inhabitants escaped. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus wrote, "In the region of Achaia occurred a great earthquake and submergence, which engulfed all of Hellas and the sanctuary of Heliconian Poseidon." Another ancient writer, Pausanias, who visited the region several centuries later, recounted the disaster and its aftermath. Before the Battle of Leuctra, in 2840 BCE, the winter season, in the month of December, divine vengeance overwhelmed Hellas. The sea flooded a great part of the country and surrounded Hellas in a circle. It covered up the city itself and the shrine of Poseidon Heliconius. The Greek historian Strabo, writing over 300 years after the disaster, reported that the city sank so completely that nothing remained visible above the water. He noted, "The submergence of Hellas happened about 363 years before the Battle of Leuctra." Another account by Pausanias suggested that while the city was submerged, the tops of trees could still be seen in the water. According to these ancient writers, boatmen would even take visitors to see the ruins beneath the clear waters, where a bronze statue of Poseidon still stood, holding a hippocampus, a mythical seahorse, in his hand. The Roman writer Aelian, in his work on the nature of animals, provides an even more poignant detail. Fishermen in the Strait of Helike observe what seems to be the ruins of a city beneath the waves, columns, pediments, and walls. He also reports that fishing nets sometimes brought up fragments of statues or other artifacts from the submerged city. These tales created an air of mystery and melancholy around Helike. a once great city now visible only as a ghostly presence beneath the waves. The destruction of Helike made a profound impression on the ancient Greek world. It demonstrated the terrible power of Poseidon, who, according to local belief, had punished the city for some offense against him. Some accounts suggest the Helicans had refused to give their statue of Poseidon to Ionian colonists who requested it. Others claim they had mistreated suppliants in the god's sanctuary. Whatever the perceived offense, the suddenness and completeness of the destruction became the subject of proverbs and philosophical reflections throughout antiquity. What makes Helike particularly intriguing is its potential connection to Atlantis. Plato wrote his dialogues about Atlantis approximately 50 years after Helike's destruction. The similarities are striking. Both were prosperous maritime cities, both were dedicated to Poseidon, both were destroyed suddenly by earthquake and flood as divine punishment, and both vanished beneath the waves. Some scholars suggest that while Plato placed Atlantis in the distant past and greatly exaggerated its size and achievements, the core of his story may have been inspired by the recent and very real catastrophe at Helike. This theory gains credibility when we consider that Plato would certainly have known about Helike's destruction. It was the most significant natural disaster in the Greek world during his lifetime. The emotional impact of an entire city disappearing overnight would have resonated powerfully with his audiences. By transforming the recent tragedy into an ancient legend, Plato could use it as a philosophical device without appearing to exploit a contemporary catastrophe. The parallels extend beyond the basic outlines. In Plato's account, Atlantis was punished for moral decline, particularly for its imperialism and aggression toward Athens and Egypt. Helike, as the leading city of the Achaean League, had indeed been involved in power struggles with other Greek cities. The divine punishment aspect of both stories aligns with Greek religious thinking about hubris, excessive pride, inevitably leading to nemesis, divine retribution. For centuries after its destruction, even the exact location of Helike remained something of a mystery. The coastline had changed, silt had accumulated, and the once thriving city was lost to view. Some thought it lay beneath the waters of the Gulf of Corinth. Others believed it had been buried under sediment as the coastline changed over time. The mystery persisted until the late 20th century, when a dedicated team of archaeologists began a systematic search for the lost city. In 1988, Greek archaeologist Dora Katsinopoulou and American scientist Stephen Soter launched the Helike Project, a methodical effort to locate the ancient city using a combination of historical texts, geological surveys, and archaeological techniques. Their work represented a perfect marriage of humanities and sciences, analyzing ancient accounts while using modern technology like ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and core drilling to search beneath the present-day landscape. After more than a decade of painstaking research, in 2001, the team announced a remarkable discovery. They had found Helike, not under the sea as long believed, but buried beneath sediment in a coastal plain, about half a mile from the modern shoreline. The earthquake had caused the city to sink below sea level, where it was inundated by the tsunami and eventually buried under layers of silt from a nearby river. Over centuries, the sunken land silted up, creating new land that concealed the ancient city beneath. The excavations revealed well-preserved buildings, streets, coins, pottery, and other artifacts from daily life in Helike. Among the most poignant discoveries were skeletons of a young couple apparently embracing as they were overtaken by the disaster. The researchers also found walls of buildings still standing to a height of almost 2 meters, their original contents remarkably intact. Ceramic vessels still in place on shelves, household items exactly where they had been left that fateful night. It was as if time had frozen in that moment of catastrophe. What made the discovery particularly significant was the state of preservation. Because Helike was buried so quickly and completely, many organic materials survived that would normally decay. Wooden household items, textiles, plant remains, and even food that had been prepared for meals that were never eaten. This level of preservation has been compared to Pompeii, offering archaeologists a rare snapshot of daily life frozen at a single moment. The findings confirmed ancient accounts of Helike's sudden destruction and shed new light on this pivotal event in ancient Greek history. Core samples revealed that the ground beneath the city had essentially liquefied during the earthquake, a phenomenon now recognized by modern seismologists, where water saturated soil temporarily loses its solid structure during seismic shaking. This would explain why the city sank so dramatically, rather than merely being damaged by shaking, as in a typical earthquake. The research team also discovered evidence of a significant tsunami that had swept inland immediately after the earthquake, carrying seawater and debris far beyond the normal coastline. The tsunami deposits included marine microfossils and shells mixed with broken building materials and household items, clear evidence of the catastrophic wave described in ancient accounts. Perhaps most interestingly, the archaeological work revealed that Helike had been rebuilt several times after previous earthquakes. The region sits atop a major fault line, and geological evidence showed repeated seismic events throughout its history. Each time, the resilient inhabitants had rebuilt their city, until that final catastrophic night when the combination of earthquake, subsidence, and tsunami proved too overwhelming for recovery. This pattern of destruction and rebuilding may have influenced Greek mythology about recurring cycles of civilization and catastrophe, themes that appear in Plato's Atlantis story as well. The discovery of Helike offers important lessons for modern coastal cities facing similar risks. The Gulf of Corinth remains one of the most seismically active regions in Europe, and many populous areas around the world face comparable hazards from the combined threats of earthquakes and tsunamis. The animal behavior reported before Helike's destruction, now understood as a potential warning sign of impending earthquakes, resonates with modern scientific interest in animal sensitivity to pre-seismic signals. Unlike the mythical cities of Atlantis, El Dorado, or Shangri-La, Helike was very real, a prosperous city with real people, abruptly destroyed by natural forces that must have seemed like divine wrath to the ancient Greeks. Its rediscovery reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary legends have their roots in historical events, transformed by time and human imagination into something larger than life. The story of Helike serves as a bridge between the realms of myth and archaeological reality in our exploration of lost cities. It demonstrates how catastrophic events can pass into legend, how real places can inspire mythical ones, and how even the most solidly documented locations can become lost to human knowledge for centuries at a time. Helike reminds us that the boundary between history and myth is often thinner than we might think. Real tragedies become legends. Actual places are transformed by storytellers into magical realms. As we leave the sunken ruins of Helike behind, we carry with us a deeper understanding of how human memory and imagination transform historical events. The remnants of this ancient Greek city, preserved by the very disaster that destroyed it, offer silent testimony to the fragility of human achievements and the enduring power of stories to keep lost places alive in our collective consciousness. Our next destination takes us from the ancient Mediterranean to the steaming jungles of South America, where another legend drove explorers to their doom in search of a city that may or may not have existed, a place known only as Zades, which became one of the greatest exploration mysteries of the 20th century. Deep in the unforgiving jungles of the Amazon rainforest lies the enigma of Zabadzed, a mysterious ancient city that has captured the imagination of explorers and adventurers for generations. Our tale of this legendary place centers on one man whose obsession with finding Z would ultimately lead to one of the greatest mysteries in the history of exploration. Unlike the mythical paradises of Shangri-La or the documented disaster of Helike, the lost city of Zed occupies an intriguing middle ground, a place that might exist, a tantalizing possibility that lured men into the green hell of the Amazon, many never to return. Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett was a British explorer trained as a surveyor and mapmaker who had earned his reputation mapping remote areas of South America in the early 20th century. Born in Torquay, England, in 1867, Fawcett came from a family with a tradition of adventure. His father was a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society, and his older brother became a well-known explorer of Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. After a distinguished military career that included service in Ceylon, North Africa, and Malta, Fawcett found his true calling in exploration. In 1906, Fawcett received a commission from the Royal Geographical Society to survey the border between Brazil and Bolivia, a mission that would be the first of 7 major expeditions he would lead into the Amazon basin over the next 2 decades. These journeys established his reputation as an extraordinary explorer with almost supernatural survival abilities. Where other expeditions suffered catastrophic losses to disease, starvation, and hostile indigenous tribes, Fawcett consistently returned with his teams largely intact. Unlike many of his Victorian and Edwardian contemporaries, Fawcett respected indigenous peoples and their knowledge, learned their languages, and developed remarkable survival skills that helped him endure conditions that had killed other explorers. He refused to travel with large, heavily armed parties, believing that small groups moved faster and appeared less threatening to native tribes. He never fired upon indigenous people, even when under attack, believing that violence only begot more violence. This philosophy, radical for its time, may have contributed to his success, and perhaps, ultimately, to his downfall. During his expeditions in Bolivia and Brazil between 1906 and 1925, Fawcett became convinced that an advanced ancient civilization had once flourished in the Amazon. He found tantalizing clues, complex pottery, strange earthworks, and stories told by indigenous tribes of ancient stone cities hidden in the jungle. He called this place Zad and described it as a city of monumental stone architecture, possibly the capital of a lost civilization that predated European contact. In a letter to his son Brian, Fawcett wrote, "The central place I call Zid, our main objective, is in a valley about 10 miles wide, and the city is on an eminence in the middle of it, approached by a barreled roadway of stone. The houses are low and windowless, and there is a pyramidal temple." This vivid description, combined with other writings where he spoke of white Indians, curious stone inscriptions, and ancient roads through the jungle, painted a picture of a sophisticated society that had somehow flourished in the hostile Amazonian environment. Fawcett's belief in Z's was considered outlandish by many of his contemporaries. The prevailing academic view at the time was that the Amazon could never have supported large, sophisticated societies. The jungle was seen as too hostile, the soil too poor for intensive agriculture, and the indigenous peoples too primitive to have built anything resembling the great civilizations of the Aztecs, Maya, or Inca. Distinguished scientists and anthropologists dismiss the possibility of advanced pre Columbian civilizations in the Amazon, viewing the rainforest as a counterfeit paradise, lush in appearance but unable to sustain large human populations. But Fawcett was undeterred. He spent years gathering evidence, studying ancient manuscripts, and interviewing indigenous peoples. His research was meticulous and wide ranging. He studied Brazilian colonial archives that told of bandeirantes, early Portuguese explorers who had found ruined cities in the jungle. He collected indigenous legends of pale skinned ancestors who had built great settlements before retreating deeper into the forest. He examined obscure manuscripts like Manuscript 512, an anonymous Portuguese document from 1753 that described a lost city with magnificent buildings and arches. Fawcett also drew inspiration from the work of archaeologist Max Uhl, who had excavated sites in the Andes that revealed sophisticated pre-Incan civilizations, suggesting that South America's archaeological history was far richer than previously believed. He corresponded with scholars worldwide, developed theories about ancient transatlantic contact, and became increasingly convinced that Za existed and increasingly determined to find it. His search for financial backing led him to newspapers and popular magazines, where he published accounts of his adventures that captivated the public. In an age when exploration still held immense romantic appeal, Fawcett's stories of remote jungles, dangerous animals, hostile tribes, and mysterious ruins sold well, helping fund his increasingly focused search for Z. In his public writings, he was careful to balance scientific caution with enticing hints about the lost city, creating an aura of possibility that attracted both public interest and some scholarly attention. In April 1925, at the age of 57, Fawcett embarked on his final expedition to find Z. Despite his age and the physical toll of previous journeys, he was in excellent condition, having prepared meticulously for what he knew would be a grueling venture. Accompanied only by his eldest son Jack, who had trained for years to join his father on this quest, and Jack's friend Raleigh Rimmel, a less experienced adventurer who had begged to come along, Fawcett ventured into the Mato Grosso region of Brazil. The expedition was deliberately small, just the 3 Englishmen and a few guides who would accompany them only to the edge of unexplored territory. Fawcett had arranged to send messages back with these guides and with indigenous messengers they might encounter. He also planned to send smoke signals at predetermined times so that monitoring outposts could track their progress. The small party traveled light, carrying minimal supplies and planning to live off the land as much as possible. Their last known position was at Dead Horse Camp, a location Fawcett had named during a previous expedition. From there, they planned to head eastward toward the Xingu River, where Fawcett believed Z was located. His last message, dated May 29th, 1925, was addressed to his wife. You need have no fear of failure. After that, the three men vanished without a trace. When no word came for weeks, then months, concern grew. Fawcett had planned for a journey of up to 2 years, so his wife Nina was not immediately alarmed. But as time passed with no smoke signals or messages, anxiety mounted. By 1927, search parties were being organized. Over the subsequent decades, numerous expeditions set out to discover what happened to Fawcett and his companions, or to find the lost city of Ziz. Some claimed to have found evidence of their fate, bones, belongings, or stories from indigenous tribes who remembered a group of foreigners passing through. Others reported finding ruins that might have been Zet itself. Yet none of these claims has been definitively proven. The Brazilian government estimated that over 100 people died on expeditions searching for Fawcett in the years following his disappearance. The mystery captivated the public imagination, creating what one writer called Fawcett fever, an obsession with solving the riddle of what happened to the famous explorer and whether his lost city existed. This fever has never entirely abated. Even in recent years, expeditions continue to search for traces of Fawcett or evidence of Ziz. Various theories have emerged about Fawcett's fate. Some suggest he and his companions were killed by indigenous tribes. The Kalapalo people of the Upper Xingu region have an oral tradition describing the arrival of three foreigners matching Fawcett's party, whom they say were killed for insulting or threatening local warriors. Others propose they died from disease, starvation, or accidents, common killers in the unforgiving jungle. A few more colorful accounts claim Fawcett never intended to return, instead planning to establish a mystic commune in the jungle based on his interest in theosophy and other esoteric beliefs. In 1952, the mystery deepened when a tribal chief gave Orlando Villas Boas, a famed Brazilian explorer, a set of bones he claimed belonged to the English father, possibly Fawcett. These remains were sent to England, but later lost before modern DNA testing could confirm their identity. Other artifacts, a compass, a knife, even a nameplate, have been presented as evidence of Fawcett's passing, but none has been conclusively tied to his expedition. What's fascinating is that modern archaeological discoveries have vindicated Fawcett's core belief. Since the 1990s, archaeologists using satellite imagery and new excavation techniques have discovered extensive evidence of large, complex societies in the Amazon basin. These cultures built vast networks of roads, canals, and earthworks, practiced sophisticated forms of agriculture, and may have supported populations in the millions before European contact brought diseases that devastated these societies. Particularly significant are the findings in the Upper Xingu region of Brazil, the very area where Fawcett believed Z was located, where archaeologists have discovered the remains of numerous large settlements connected by straight roads, with evidence of extensive land management, farming, and fish farming. These sites feature defensive ditches, plazas, and mounds arranged in geometric patterns, suggesting sophisticated urban planning. Though not built of stone as Fawcett imagined, these extensive earthwork settlements were indeed cities in terms of their size, complexity, and regional importance. Similarly, in Bolivia's Beni region, researchers have found hundreds of large earthworks called geoglyphs, geometric shapes only visible from the air, suggesting a level of planning and social organization once thought impossible in Amazonia. Recent studies of the geoglyphs indicate they were part of a sophisticated landscape management system that supported large populations through a combination of raised field agriculture, agroforestry, and aquaculture. The Amazon we now know was not an untouched wilderness, but a largely cultivated landscape shaped by human hands for millennia. The soil, far from being uniformly poor, includes large patches of terra preta, or black earth, a human made carbon rich soil that remains fertile for centuries. Created through a process of burning and composting, terra preta allowed ancient Amazonians to practice intensive agriculture in areas otherwise characterized by poor tropical soils. Using these and other techniques, ancient Amazonians sustained large populations in environments once considered too hostile for advanced civilization. In the Llanos de Moxos region of Bolivia, archaeologists have discovered evidence of massive hydraulic earthworks, canals, reservoirs, and raised fields covering thousands of square kilometers. These sophisticated water management systems allowed pre Columbian peoples to control flooding, irrigate crops during dry seasons, and create rich aquatic ecosystems for fishing. The scale of these works suggests social organization far beyond what was previously thought possible in Amazonian societies. Does this mean Zai exists exactly as Fawcett imagined it? Probably not. The stone city with pyramids he described hasn't been found, but something just as remarkable has been discovered, evidence of sophisticated cultures adapting brilliantly to their environment in ways previous scientists had failed to recognize or understand. The ancient Amazonians created complex societies with distinctive cultural expressions that were different from but no less impressive than the stone building civilizations of the Andes or Mesoamerica. The story of Z reminds us that legends often contain kernels of truth and that our understanding of history is constantly evolving. What seems impossible in one generation may be proven in the next. Fawcett's obsession with Z may have led to his disappearance, but his core intuition that the Amazon once supported advanced civilizations has been vindicated by modern science. Though he searched for stone cities and found none, he was correct that the Amazon held the secrets of lost civilizations waiting to be discovered. Fawcett himself has become as much a legend as the city he sought, a figure who bridges the era of Victorian exploration in modern archaeology, whose vision extended beyond the prejudices of his time to recognize the possibility of sophisticated indigenous civilizations that his contemporaries dismissed. His disappearance, never conclusively explained, adds an additional layer of mystery to the story of Z. Today, as development and deforestation threaten the Amazon, archaeologists race to document sites that may hold further clues to these ancient civilizations. Modern indigenous communities, descendants of those who built the earthworks and created the terra preta, fight to preserve both their ancestral lands and cultural heritage. The story of Z continues to unfold, not as a single lost city, but as a complex network of settlements and managed landscapes that challenges our understanding of human adaptation and achievement. As we leave the mysterious depths of the Amazon behind, the legacy of Percy Fawcett and his lost city reminds us that exploration is not merely a physical journey, but an intellectual one, a willingness to question established wisdom and see possibilities where others see only obstacles. Whether or not Zah existed exactly as he imagined, his quest expanded our understanding of what was possible in the ancient Americas and continues to inspire those who seek to uncover the secrets of our collective human past. Our next destination takes us to the Rose Red City, half as old as time, a place that, unlike Z, was rediscovered and stands today as one of the world's most spectacular archaeological sites, the ancient Nabatean capital of Petra, hidden for centuries among the sandstone cliffs of southern Jordan.